Matthew chapter 10, uh, said it, I don't know how many times, a lot of times. There are things here that Jesus says that are a little bewildering and a little bit difficult to interpret. As much as I'd like to say, well, we don't need to know, I don't think I can say that. Just because it's hard doesn't mean don't bother. For me, it means knuckle down, give it thought, meditate, ponder, consider deeply. All right, here's a hard one. Verse 34 of Matthew 10. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. Ooh. And then he goes on, for I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Now, that idea is from Micah, the prophet in the Old Testament. And this is not, this is kind of a reiteration of what he said in same chapter 10, verse 17, be on your guard against men. And then he goes on to say in verse 21, brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. All men will hate you because of me, but he who stands firm to the end will be saved. Now, all right, I thought Jesus was the Prince of Peace, everlasting Father. Well, he was. He is the Prince of Peace. And yet, there's this paradox. He said, I have not come, or don't suppose that I have come to bring peace. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. So, what are we supposed to do with that? Well, here's what I think. I think Jesus is saying there will be a clear distinction between those who follow me and those who don't. And so, as a sword cuts across, this dichotomy will be obvious to the degree that men and women within families will be against each other. This happens. And in our culture, actually not as much as it would have been in Jesus' culture. Judaism is a culture that by Jesus' day had become an honor-shame culture. And if a family member somehow turned from Judaism to something else, they became dead to their family. So when people turn from Judaism and turn to Jesus, I would have said, well, that's not turning from Judaism, that's just turning to Jesus, the fulfillment of everything Judaism was and is. But that's not the way families thought of it. Families were, it's quite interesting. Families were ruled by the father, who often was ruled by the wife. Well, I think what Jesus is saying, and what he says next is a little bit of hyperbole, and I think the point is, it will be costly to follow him. Verse 37, anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And anyone who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Yikes. I have 3 daughters and a wife, and I love them. Well, I love them more than anybody on earth. I don't want to love them more than I love Jesus. I'm grateful they've never put me in a position where I had to choose between them and Jesus. But people in Jesus' day had to choose that. Okay. And his word was, if you don't love me more than them, you're not worthy of me. There's that worthy idea. What do we do with that? Well, a couple of things to remember. Don't forget, Jesus is speaking on that side of the cross, before the death and resurrection. In that day, worthy became the formula was do good, do more equals worthy. That was the law had created by Jesus' day the function of obey more completely, obey more fully, do better, do more, work harder. And yet, Jesus said here, it's not work. It's not the works that I do. It's my love for him. Now, love is always expressed. Real love finds expression, and so I will obey him. And later he says, if you love me, keep my commands, obey my word. Okay. Anyone who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Okay, now, our context is that the cross represents our forgiveness and freedom because of the sacrifice of Jesus. But when Jesus spoke these words, the cross meant one and only one thing: a shameful death. Capital, my mouth's not obeying my brain. Capital punishment for criminals. So when Jesus said, anyone who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me, well, this was actually his cross was a good bit in the future yet. So when the disciples, that was the crowd he was talking to. He wasn't talking to, the masses or the multitudes. He was talking to the 12. Don't forget this part of his commission to them. when they heard him talk about taking up their cross, it was all about suffering and shame that ended in death. This would not have been one of those, when the apostles heard that, I don't think they would have said, yeah, and tried to touch the cross around their neck. Not at all. This kind of would, I mean, it's hard enough when Jesus says you got to love me more than your mom and dad, you got to love me more than your kids. You got to take up your cross and follow me. Shame, suffering, death. If I'd have been a disciple, I would have thought, what? I like the part about preach a simple message, find a man of peace, a home to dwell in. I like the part about heal people, cast out demons. I like that. Don't much like this. And then he goes on in verse, eyes are betraying me these days, 39. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. This is symbolic language. How do you literally find your life? I don't know. I know symbolically. For me, what I'm hearing in my mind is I find the things in life that make me fulfilled. And if I am looking for, the only way I find them is by looking for them. You rarely stumble onto the meaning of life. You rarely stumble onto your best life or what you think is your best life. But here's the point Jesus was making. What you think is your best life is not your best life. And what you might think would be your worst life really is your best life. Best life, getting what I want. Worst life, taking up my cross and following him. But the paradox is that you really only find your life by losing it. When I yield my ambitions, my wants, my desires to him, this is where I find real life. Now, that's a principle to draw from this. It was spoken directly again to the disciples. And I think the reason that maybe Jesus told them these things directly is because for them, the road ahead was going to get really rough. The only apostle that we know died a natural death was the Apostle John. And he didn't die at a resort. He died in exile. Well, he was exiled and then he died a natural death, but he didn't have this, it wasn't a happy ending, okay? The others were martyred because of their faith. And I think Jesus was making a point. Hey, guys, this is not going to be a vacation. You're going to see extraordinary things and do extraordinary things on this mission. And there will be a cost. The cost rarely gets talked about in our day, and I don't necessarily think my cost is the same as the cost of the apostles, but the principle is still there. If I want to find my life, the best way to find it, the only way to find it, is to lose it by yielding it to Him completely. And I'll never get done with that process. Well, see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.